When a wealthy woman discovered her maid's daughter secretly teaching her son how to study, she didn't just fire them, she humiliated them in front of everyone. But life has a way of turning tables, and years later she learned that the girl she insulted was the one person her son could never forget. The day I met them, the sky had that golden warmth that makes everything look softer, kinder. But nothing about that house was kind. The walls were white marble, the floors polished so smooth you could see your reflection, and the people who lived there, well, they thought they were made of gold too. My name is Lily. I was 16, though the way people looked at me made me feel smaller. My mother, Rosa, worked as a maid in the Alvarez mansion. We had no home of our own. The servants' quarters at the back of the property were all we knew. Some nights, when the rain came through the thin roof, we huddled together and promised each other that life wouldn't always be like this. The Alvarezes were one of the wealthiest families in town. Mr. Alvarez owned half the factories along the coast, and his wife, Helena, ran charity galas where she wore diamonds while preaching about compassion. Their son Adrian was 15, a quiet boy with dark hair, polite eyes, and the kind of sadness rich people aren't supposed to have. I first noticed him in the garden one afternoon, sitting under the fig tree with a book open on his lap. His tutor had stormed off minutes earlier, shouting that he'd had enough. I was hanging laundry nearby, trying to ignore the shouting from the house, when I heard Adrian sigh. "Can't get anything right," he muttered, slamming the book shut. I hesitated, then said softly, "You read too fast. You're skipping the middle lines." He looked up, startled. "What?" I froze. Maids' daughters weren't supposed to talk to the family, let alone correct them. But he didn't sound angry, just curious. I pointed to his book. "If you slow down, the words make more sense. Like listening instead of running." He frowned, then opened the book again. "You read?" "A bit," I admitted. My mother had taught me at night when no one was around, using scraps of old newspapers and torn pages from discarded books. Adrian shifted, handing the book toward me. "Show me then." So I did. For an hour we sat together under that fig tree, reading aloud and laughing whenever we stumbled over a hard word. It felt normal. Equal, almost. For the first time I forgot who I was and where I came from. But peace doesn't last long when you live in someone else's world. The next afternoon Helena Alvarez saw us. I didn't hear her coming. One moment I was showing Adrian how to pronounce a tricky sentence, and the next her voice cut through the air like glass breaking. "What is going on here?" Adrian jumped up so fast he nearly dropped his book. I stood, my hands trembling. Helena's heels clicked on the stone path as she approached, her eyes burning holes through me. "Mother," Adrian began, "she was just..." "She..." Helena snapped, glaring at me. "She is a servant's daughter. What could she possibly be doing with you?" "I was helping him read," I stammered. He asked me to." Her laughter was sharp and cruel. "Helping him? You think you can teach my son? You, barefoot, filthy, with no education?" She turned to Adrian. "Have you completely lost your mind? Mother, please." Silence. Her voice rose, echoing across the garden. "Do you have any idea how this looks? The help's child playing tutor to my son? What will people say?" Tears stung my eyes. "I didn't mean any harm, ma'am. I was only..." "Enough." She stepped closer, her perfume thick and suffocating. "You and your mother are here to clean, not to socialize. I will not have you filling my son's head with your gutter manners." Adrian tried to speak again, but she cut him off with a glare. "Get inside. Now." He hesitated, his jaw tight. For a brief second, his eyes met mine, full of apology and helpless anger, before he turned and walked away. Helena waited until he was gone, then turned her fury back on me. "You think because my son is kind, you can crawl your way into his life? Let me tell you something, girl. People like you don't belong in this house. You don't belong anywhere." She grabbed my arm and shoved me toward the gate. "Get out of my sight before I have both you and your mother thrown out for good." I stumbled away, biting my lips so hard it bled. My hands shook as I ran behind the servants' quarters. My mother found me there, sitting in the dirt, my face buried in my knees. "Lily," she whispered, kneeling beside me. "What happened?" When I told her, she went pale. "Oh, child," she said softly, wrapping her arms around me. "You shouldn't have spoken to him. The Alvarezes, they don't forgive easily." "I was only helping," I said, my voice breaking. "He asked me to." "I know," she murmured, stroking my hair. "But to them, kindness from someone poor looks like ambition." That night, Helena summoned my mother. I stayed behind, listening through the thin wall as she spoke. "You and your daughter have grown too comfortable here," Helena said coldly. "Pack your things." I want you both gone by morning." My mother's voice shook. "Please, ma'am. We have nowhere to go. That's not my problem. I won't have charity cases undermining my family." I'll never forget the sound of my mother's quiet sobs after the door closed. We left before dawn. It was raining, and our few belongings were soaked through by the time we reached the edge of town. My mother found work washing clothes at a small inn, and I tried to help however I could. But the humiliation clung to me like a shadow. Weeks passed, then months. I sometimes saw Adrian from afar, his family's car gliding past the marketplace, his face turned toward the window. Once he saw me too. Our eyes met for a moment, but he didn't wave. He couldn't. By winter, my mother grew ill. The cold in our small rented room made her cough worse each night. We barely had enough for food, let alone medicine. One evening, desperate, I went back to the Alvarez mansion. The guards almost didn't let me in, but I begged. I just wanted to see Helena, to ask for a little help, not for myself, but for my mother. When she finally came to the door, she looked at me as though I were dirt tracked onto her marble floor. "You again?" she said, folding her arms. I thought I made myself clear. "Please," I said, trembling. "My mother is sick. We can't afford a doctor. I'll work for free, just until she recovers." Her lips curved into a cold smile. "Free, you say? How generous of you." I nodded quickly. "Anything. I'll do anything." She stepped closer, tilting her head. "Tell me, Lily, do you still think you're smarter than us? Do you still think you can teach my son?" My throat tightened. "No, ma'am." Her eyes glittered with cruel delight. "Say it louder." "No, ma'am," I repeated, my voice cracking. Again. "I'm not smarter than you," I whispered. Her laughter was soft but poisonous. "Remember that, girl. People like you were born to serve, not to dream." She turned to leave, then paused. "I'll send someone with medicine. Out of charity, not pity. Don't come back." She never did. My mother passed away 2 weeks later. I buried her behind the church on the hill, the only place that didn't ask for payment. 4 days I sat by her grave, numb and silent, until the world around me became just noise. But grief has a strange way of burning away fear. When you've lost everything, you stop caring about rules meant to keep you small. So I left town. I took the little money my mother had saved and walked miles until I found work in a small library in the city. The owner, an old woman named Agnes, saw something in me that Helena never did. She taught me properly, how to write, how to read faster, how to speak with confidence. "Knowledge," Agnes once said, "isn't about who you are. It's about what you're brave enough to seek." Those words stayed with me. Years passed. I studied every night after work until my eyes ached and my fingers cramped. And when the time came, I earned a scholarship. By the time I turned 23, I was standing in front of a classroom full of students, teaching literature at a private academy, not as a maid's daughter, not as a servant, but as Miss Lily Rosa. And one day, fate brought me face to face with the past I thought I'd buried. Because sitting in the back row of my class was a boy I hadn't seen in 7 years. Adrian Alvarez. When I first saw him sitting there, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. 7 years had changed him. His face was sharper now, his jaw stronger, but the eyes, those eyes hadn't changed at all. He sat in the back row of my classroom, wearing the same expression he had as a boy, calm, thoughtful, a little distant. The name on the attendance sheet confirmed it, Adrian Alvarez. I felt the air leave my lungs. For a moment, my hands trembled so hard I nearly dropped the roll call list. He didn't recognize me. At least, not immediately. He looked up when I called his name, and our eyes met for the first time in 7 years. Something flickered in his gaze, confusion, then curiosity, but he said nothing. "Present," he replied simply, his voice deeper than I remembered. I managed to finish the roll without faltering, but the memories wouldn't stop. The garden. The book. His mother's face twisted in contempt. The humiliation that had followed. After class, I sat at my desk long after everyone had gone. My heart was pounding like I'd run a mile. Of all the students in all the schools in the city, it had to be him. That night I couldn't sleep. The rain tapped against my window the way it had the night my mother died. I thought about what she'd say if she knew where I was now, standing in front of students, teaching the same lessons I'd once dared to share under a fig tree. Maybe she'd smile. Or maybe she'd warn me not to open old wounds. The next morning, Adrian stayed behind after class. I could feel his hesitation as the last few students left. "Miss Rosa?" he said quietly. I turned. "Yes." He studied me for a moment, then frowned slightly. "Do I know you? You seem familiar." I forced a small smile. "I don't think so. I've only just started teaching here." He nodded slowly, though I could tell he didn't believe me entirely. It's strange. I keep thinking I've seen you somewhere before. You might be remembering someone else, I said gently, gathering my papers. He hesitated. Maybe. But as he left the room, he turned once more, his eyes narrowing slightly, not in suspicion but in thought. For days I told myself it didn't matter. I was his teacher now and he was just another student. But it was impossible to forget who he was, or what his mother had done. Still, I saw glimpses of the boy I'd once known, the way he helped another student pick up fallen books, the quiet kindness in his tone. He was different from the world he came from. That was what had made Helena furious before. A week later, I stayed late to mark essays. The corridors were nearly empty when I heard a knock on my classroom door. It was him again. Sorry to bother you, he said, holding a notebook. I didn't understand the assignment on narrative perspective. I thought you might help me. I nodded, motioning for him to sit. Of course. Let's look at it together. We spent the next half hour going through his notes. He listened intently, asking thoughtful questions. At one point he laughed softly at a mistake he'd made, and I caught myself smiling too. It felt so familiar, the same rhythm, the same gentle connection. But when he looked up, our eyes met again and something shifted. Lily, he said suddenly. The sound of my name froze me. What did you just say? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He leaned back slightly. That's it, isn't it? Your name. Lily. I remember now. I tried to speak, but no words came. You used to help me read, he said softly. Under the fig tree. My mother? His voice faltered. She hurt you. I swallowed hard, forcing composure. That was a long time ago, Adrian. Let's focus on your work. But he shook his head. No. I need to say this. He looked down, guilt shadowing his face. I should have stood up for you. I was just a cowardly boy, hiding behind my mother's rules. You were 15, I said gently. There was nothing you could have done. He looked up, his expression pained. I could have tried. The silence between us grew heavy. Finally, I said quietly, it doesn't matter anymore. The past is done. But we both knew that wasn't true. From that day things changed. He stayed after class more often, always with questions about literature but sometimes just to talk. He told me about university plans, about how his mother still tried to control every aspect of his life, about how he felt trapped in a golden cage. I listened, giving the kind of advice I wished someone had given me years ago. You don't owe her your future, I said one afternoon. He looked at me with a small, tired smile. You sound like my conscience. I laughed softly. Maybe I am. For a while it almost felt normal. But rumors travel fast in places like that. One morning the headmaster called me into his office. He was polite, but his tone was uneasy. Miss Rosa, he began, there have been concerns raised about your relationship with one of your students. I felt the color drain from my face. Concerns? He cleared his throat. Specifically Mr. Alvarez's mother. She called earlier this week. She's questioning the appropriateness of your tutoring sessions. Of course. Helena. She'd found out. I gripped the armrest of the chair, my knuckles white. Sir, I assure you there is nothing inappropriate. I've only been helping him academically. I believe you, he said gently. But Mrs. Alvarez is a significant donor to this school. I'd advise caution. I nodded stiffly and left, my mind spinning. That evening, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the city lights through the window. Part of me wanted to disappear again, to run, to avoid her venom. But I wasn't that scared, barefoot girl anymore. 2 days later, Helena Alvarez appeared in my classroom before lessons began. She hadn't changed much. Her beauty was still sharp, expensive. But there were lines around her eyes now, fine cracks in her perfect porcelain mask. Miss Rosa, she said coolly, shutting the door behind her. Or should I say Lily? My. Life has been generous to you, hasn't it? I stood slowly. Mrs. Alvarez. She looked me up and down, her smile thin. Imagine my surprise when I discovered my son's new teacher is the same little girl I once caught trying to educate him in my garden. Her words dripped with mockery. I'm not here to relive that day, I said evenly. If you're worried about your son, I assure you. She interrupted me with a wave of her hand. Don't patronize me. I know your type, Lily. The poor girl with new clothes, pretending to be something she's not. But I haven't forgotten where you came from. You were a maid's daughter. A beggar in my house. My pulse pounded, but my voice stayed steady. And yet here I am teaching your son. Strange how life works, isn't it? Her expression darkened. Don't get clever with me. Stay away from him. If you don't, I'll make sure this school never employs you again. I met her gaze without flinching. I'm not afraid of you anymore. She blinked, momentarily thrown. Excuse me? I said. I repeated quietly, I'm not afraid of you. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then she smiled, cold and cruel. You will be, she said softly. I always win, Lily. Always. She turned and left, the echo of her heels fading down the hall. But this time her threats didn't crush me. They only fueled something inside me, a fire that had been waiting years to burn. Because Helena Alvarez might have destroyed my childhood, but she would not destroy my dignity again. And if she thought I would step aside quietly, she was about to learn that even the maid's daughter could fight back. The following days felt heavy, like the air itself carried warning. I knew Helena wouldn't stop at threats. She'd come after me quietly, the way wealthy people destroy those they think beneath them, with whispers, influence, and power. It started subtly. My hours were reduced, due to budget adjustments. A few parents complained suddenly about unorthodox teaching methods. Colleagues who'd once greeted me warmly began to avoid eye contact. I didn't need to be told where it was coming from. Helena Alvarez was pulling strings again. Still, I refused to back down. I taught my classes with calm confidence, smiling even when I could feel the tension building. The students, bless them, seemed oblivious to the politics swirling around us. Except Adrian. He saw it all. One afternoon, he lingered after everyone left, watching as I packed my papers. She's doing this, isn't she? He said quietly. I hesitated. Who? My mother. I looked up. His expression was a mix of anger and guilt. I heard her on the phone, he continued. She's trying to get you dismissed. She thinks you're trying to manipulate me. I laughed bitterly. Manipulate you? Adrian, I'm your teacher. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. She's convinced you're using me to get back at her. That you've come for revenge. The words stung, not because they were true, but because they were exactly the kind of thing Helena would believe. To her, kindness from someone poor could only be a scheme. I shook my head. I don't want revenge, Adrian. I just want to live my life without her shadow in it. He nodded, his jaw tightening. Then let me help you. You can't, I said softly. The moment you stand up to her, she'll turn on you too. She already has, he murmured. You should see how she talks about me now. She's desperate to control everything I do, who I see, where I go. I'm suffocating, Lily. Hearing him say my name again made my chest tighten. I looked away. You're almost an adult. Soon you'll be free of her. He smiled sadly. You say that like freedom is simple. I didn't answer. I knew it wasn't. That evening, after he left, I sat in my empty classroom and thought about how strange life could be. Years ago, he'd been the boy I couldn't speak to without trembling. Now he was the one offering to protect me. But part of me also knew Helena wouldn't stop until she saw me broken again. The storm came sooner than I expected. 2 weeks later, I was summoned to the headmaster's office again. This time his face was grave. Miss Rosa, he began slowly, I'm afraid I have no choice. We're terminating your contract effective immediately. I felt the floor tilt under me. What? Why? He sighed. There's been a formal complaint. Accusations of inappropriate conduct. Mrs. Alvarez claims you've been spending time alone with her son outside school hours. That's a lie. I snapped. We've only met here in class. She's twisting everything. He looked pained. I believe you truly. But she's threatening to withdraw her donations. I can't fight her influence. For a long moment I couldn't speak. It was happening again, the same helplessness, the same injustice. I thought I'd escaped it, built a life beyond it, but Helena was pulling me back into her cruel little game. I left the office without another word, my vision blurring with unshed tears. By the time I stepped outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of red that felt almost mocking. I'd worked for years to stand tall, to prove that my mother's daughter could become something. And in a few words, Helena had tried to take it all away. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window watching the city lights flicker, remembering my mother's words, don't let them decide your worth. I decided then, I wouldn't run this time. The next morning, I marched straight to the Alvarez mansion. The same iron gates loomed before me just as they had all those years ago. The guards recognized me and looked uneasy. Mrs. Alvarez isn't expecting visitors, one said. She'll want to see me, I replied, my voice calm but firm. Minutes later, Helena appeared on the steps, elegant in a silk robe, a teacup in hand. She looked exactly as I remembered, beautiful and poisonous. Well, if it isn't my favorite charity case, she said smoothly. Come to thank me for ending your little career? I stood my ground. I came to tell you that you failed. Her smile faltered slightly. Excuse me? I lost my job, yes. But you didn't ruin me. You can't. Not anymore. She set her cup down with a soft clink. You really should be careful how you speak to me, dear. I can still make life difficult for you. You already did, I said. When I was a child. When you threw my mother and me into the street because you couldn't stand the thought of someone poor teaching your son something good. But look where that led. Your son respects me. He listens to me, not because of money but because he sees what you never could. Her face hardened. My son is naive. You filled his head with nonsense. No, I said quietly. You filled his heart with fear. I just reminded him he has a choice. She stepped closer, her eyes sharp. You think you've won him over? You think you can take my son from me? I don't want to take anything, I said. I just want you to stop destroying everything that doesn't fit your idea of perfection. Helena's mask cracked, if only for a second. Beneath the polished cruelty, there was something almost desperate. You don't understand, she whispered. He's all I have left. For a moment I saw the human beneath the diamond shell. But then her pride returned like a shield. Get off my property, she hissed. I turned to leave, then paused. One day you'll realize you can't buy love or respect. You can only earn it. And when that day comes, I hope it's not too late. Her voice shook with fury. Get out. I walked away without looking back. Days passed. I didn't know what would happen next, but strangely I felt lighter. I'd faced her and survived. That was something. Then one evening there was a knock on my door. It was Adrian. He looked different, not the quiet, controlled young man from class, but someone determined, restless. I heard what she did, he said, stepping inside. They fired you, didn't they? I nodded. It's fine. I'll find something else. No, he said firmly. It's not fine. She's been manipulating my life for years and I've let her. But not anymore. I frowned. Adrian, don't. I've already spoken to her, he interrupted. I told her I'm leaving. I got accepted to a university abroad. I'm going next month. I stared at him. You're serious? He nodded. Completely. And I wouldn't have done it if not for you. You taught me that I don't have to live under her control. A strange warmth spread through my chest, a mixture of pride and sadness. You don't owe me anything, Adrian. He smiled faintly. Maybe not. But I wanted you to know that I remember everything. What you did for me when we were children. It mattered. It still does. Before I could reply, he reached into his pocket and handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter of recommendation, signed by the dean of a private academy. I asked my father to speak to someone, he said. He doesn't know everything, but he owes me a favor. There's a teaching position opening there. You deserve better than what she took from you. I blinked, speechless. Adrian, I can't accept this. Yes, you can, he said gently. It's not charity. It's justice. Tears filled my eyes, but I smiled through them. You've grown up, Adrian. He laughed softly. I had a good teacher. When he left that night, the air felt different, lighter, full of promise. For the first time in years, I believed the world might finally be fair. But I should have known Helena wouldn't let go so easily. Because the next morning, I opened my door to find an envelope slipped under it. Inside was a photograph, a grainy image of Adrian leaving my flat the night before, and a note in Helena's sharp handwriting. Still think you can win? You'll regret underestimating me. My hand shook as I read it. The fight wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The photograph felt heavier than paper should. I stared at it for a long time, the edges trembling between my fingers. Helena's handwriting was as sharp as ever, her words soaked with venom. I had known she wouldn't stop, but I hadn't expected her to stoop this low. She wanted to scare me, to remind me that she still had power. But fear no longer ruled me. I had lived through worse. Still, I couldn't ignore what this meant. If she spread that photograph with her usual twist of lies, it could ruin both Adrian and me. I needed to protect him, even if that meant staying silent. The next few days passed in a blur. I prepared to leave the city quietly, to start over once again. The academy Adrian had recommended me for had already accepted my application, and I was due to start in a few weeks. It was a fresh beginning, but unfinished battles have a way of following you until you face them. One morning as I packed my books, there was a knock at the door. I half expected it to be another threat, but when I opened it, Adrian stood there, breathless and furious. She showed it to my father, he said without greeting. The photo. She told him you were trying to seduce me for money. I closed my eyes for a moment. Of course she did. He stepped closer, his voice shaking. He doesn't believe her completely, but she's spreading it around her circle. It's only a matter of time before it gets out. She'll stop if I go, I said quietly. That's what she wants. Adrian looked at me like I just suggested burning the sun out of the sky. No. You can't keep running because of her. You've already lost enough to her cruelty. Adrian? He interrupted, his voice low but fierce. You once told me I didn't owe her my future. The same goes for you, Lily. She doesn't own yours either. I wanted to argue, but the truth in his words silenced me. For a long moment we stood there, the air between us full of everything we couldn't quite say. Then he took a deep breath. There's a gala this weekend. One of her charity events. All the people who believe her lies will be there. So will my father. I want you to come. I blinked. Adrian, that's madness. He smiled faintly. Maybe. But it's time she faces what she's done. Not just to you, to everyone. I hesitated. The thought of stepping into that glittering world again made my stomach twist. But another part of me, the one that had grown stronger through every injustice, whispered that this was the moment I'd been waiting for. I nodded. All right. I'll come. The night of the gala arrived cold and clear. I borrowed a simple navy dress from a friend at the library. It wasn't glamorous, but it made me feel like myself, grounded, real. When I arrived, the ballroom was exactly as I remembered Helena's world. Dazzling lights, false smiles, the sound of laughter that never reached anyone's eyes. I spotted her near the center of the room, radiant in silver, surrounded by admirers. Her laughter floated above the music, sharp and hollow. Adrian found me by the entrance. He looked nervous but determined. Ready? As I'll ever be, I said. The plan wasn't mine. It was his. He had spoken to his father, told him everything, from the humiliation years ago to the photo and the lies she'd spun. Mr. Alvarez hadn't reacted as expected. He'd been quiet, thoughtful. And then he'd told Adrian to bring me here. So we walked together through the crowd. Whispers followed us like ripples in still water. Helena turned at the sound, her smile faltering when she saw me. What are you doing here? She hissed as we approached. Invited, Adrian said coolly. Her face flushed, but before she could respond, Mr. Alvarez joined us. Helena, he said calmly, perhaps you should let the young lady speak. Her eyes flicked between us, suspicion turning to dread. You can't be serious. But her husband nodded toward me. Go on, Miss Rosa. For a moment, the entire room seemed to fade away. I took a slow breath, my heart steady despite the tremor in my hands. Many years ago, I began, my voice clear, I lived in this house as the daughter of a maid. I was 16 and your son was 15. He struggled with his reading and I tried to help him. When his mother found us, she humiliated me and threw my mother and me out into the street. We had nowhere to go. My mother died not long after. I worked, I studied, and I became a teacher. I never sought revenge. But Mrs. Alvarez could not stand that I existed without shame. Gasps rippled through the guests, but I kept going. She has lied, spread rumors, and used her influence to destroy my career. Not because of what I've done, but because she cannot bear the thought of being wrong. Tonight, I want only one thing, for the truth to be heard. Helena's composure cracked completely. You're lying, she said sharply, though her voice trembled. She's lying. This girl has always wanted attention. She used my kindness. Enough. It was Mr. Alvarez who spoke, his voice cutting through the room. Helena, I saw the photograph. And I spoke to the headmaster. Your lies have gone too far. Her face drained of color. You're taking their side? I'm taking the side of decency, he said. Something you seem to have forgotten. The crowd murmured. Someone whispered my name. Helena's eyes darted around the room, searching for support but found none. For the first time she looked small, trapped by the very society she'd spent years manipulating. Adrian stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. Mother, you've hurt people because you thought money made you better. It doesn't. You taught me that love and kindness were weaknesses. But you were wrong. They're strength. Helena's lips trembled. Adrian, please? He shook his head. I still love you. You're my mother. But I can't let you destroy people anymore. Not her. Not anyone. She stared at him, then at me. The fight in her eyes faded, replaced by something I'd never seen before, fear and regret. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the room. The echo of her heels was the only sound for a long time. Then Mr. Alvarez approached me. Miss Rosa, he said quietly, I owe you an apology. For my wife's cruelty and for my silence. If you'll allow it, I'd like to make amends. I nodded slowly. Thank you, sir. But your son has already done that. He smiled faintly. Then it seems he's learned well. When I left the gala that night, the air outside felt cool and clean. The weight I'd carried for years, humiliation, grief, anger, finally lifted. For the first time, I wasn't running from my past. I'd faced it, spoken my truth, and walked away free. Weeks later, I began teaching at the new academy. The days were long but fulfilling, filled with laughter and the smell of chalk dust and paper. Sometimes, when the sun hit my desk just right, I'd think of my mother and whisper, "We made it." Adrian wrote to me from abroad. His letters were thoughtful, always ending with the same words, "Thank you for teaching me more than books ever could." I'd smile each time, knowing that no matter how far apart our lives went, we would always share that small, quiet bond born under the fig tree, the place where kindness had once been punished but in the end had triumphed. As for Helena Alvarez, I never saw her again. Rumors said she'd withdrawn from society, her charities shuttered, her circle reduced to silence. Perhaps she finally saw herself clearly in the mirror of her own making. Sometimes I wonder if she ever thought of me, of the girl she once called worthless. I hope she did. Not out of spite, but because remembering might have taught her something. I'm not a maid's daughter anymore. I'm a teacher, a survivor, a woman who learned that no humiliation lasts forever, not when you rise above it with grace. And maybe that's what true wealth is. Not the marble floors or the diamonds, but the strength to forgive, to rebuild, and to keep walking forward even after the world tries to push you down. Because in the end, no one can take dignity from the one who refuses to let go of it.